Should you buy the all-new 2024 Land Cruiser or should you buy the all-new 2024 Lexus GX? They're both based on the same platform, share many of the components. In fact, their body profile looks almost identical. So there are many questions you might have in terms of trying to figure out which is the best car for you. So let me go through 20 things I discovered as the key differences between the all-new 2024 Land Cruiser and the 2024 Lexus GX. And hopefully that will help you decide which one to get. I know which one I'm going to get. Let's go. Welcome back. So as you know, I love Lexus GX, so much so that we currently own two 2023 Lexus GX 460. This is one of them. The other one is Nora Green. And I know I'm very tempted though to at least replace one of them to the newer GX model. But now I have a choice. I could also buy the all-new Land Cruiser instead of the GX. So I have to also make a choice for replacing one of the GX anyways. I will definitely keep at least one GX because there's no more V8 GXs. And this one is built like a tank. It's going to last forever. So I'm definitely not going to let that one go. But one of them I can play around with and change it to Land Cruiser or something else. So I'm really looking forward to it. But I know that I will go through the same struggle in terms of making a decision because the Land Cruiser and the GX are so similar now. But there are some really important key differences that you should know. The first one, which is the most important one, is the biggest difference of all between the GX and Land Cruiser, and that is the powertrain. So I've got my numbers here just so that I don't get the numbers wrong. But the GX, which is the only one that has the twin-turbo V6 engine in it, has a 3.4-liter displacement twin-turbo V6, good for 349 horsepower and 479 pound-foot of torque. So plenty of torque, plenty of power, even though it's not a hybrid. It's the exact same engine that is in the Lexus LX as well. And what about the new Land Cruiser? Well, here's the number for the Land Cruiser. It now has 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, but with hybrid. It only comes in the hybrid format, in the form of iForce Max, as they call it. And it has exactly 326 horsepower and a whopping 465 pound-foot of torque. So the two numbers are actually pretty close, right? We have 349 horsepower for GX versus 326, and then we have 479 for torque versus 465. And keep in mind that Lexus takes premium fuel. Toyota will not require premium fuel. So if you were to put premium fuel on the Land Cruiser, these numbers will go up a little bit more as well. So they'll be even more close. But obviously, one is a V6 and one is a 4-cylinder engine, both with turbocharged engine. And that's something you have to decide. I know that many of you guys said that you don't want the Land Cruiser with a turbo 4, and I agree with you. But none of us have driven the Land Cruiser with that engine, so we can't make that comment yet, because the other Toyota model with the exact same engine is a Tacoma TRD Pro and Tacoma Trail Hunter, and none of us have driven that either. So it would be really hard to make any kind of comments and judgment as to how the 2.4-liter Turbo 4 will actually feel on the road. But based on my engineer experience, yes, I do agree that the V6, even though it doesn't have a hybrid, will feel a little bit more settled, it'll be a little bit smoother, and it will feel all around more refined and a bit closer to the feel of what a naturally aspirated engine will be, just because it's got a bit more of a relaxed feel. That's my estimation anyway. Whereas Turbo 4, because the same engine is on many other Toyota models, will feel a little bit busier. It's going to be a bit noisier, and even though it has a lot of power, it's going to have to work a little bit harder to get to, let's say, 0 to 60, for example. So those are things that we can only speculate at this moment, and only you can decide which one makes more sense, because we also don't know the fuel efficiency of these two engines for comparison at this point in time. Now, given the choice for me though, I definitely like the 3.4-liter twin-turbo V6 engine, because I had that engine in my Tundra TRD Pro that I owned. And of course, that one is a hybrid, so it has even more power and torque. But I have driven Tundra and other Toyota models with the 3.4-liter twin-turbo V6 with no hybrid, including the Lexus LX, and I really like that engine. I think it's a really good, solid, refined, smooth engine with plenty of power and torque. So for me, given the choice, just based on the engine alone, right now, I prefer the GX over the Land Cruiser. But you know what? Until I drive both, I might have to reserve my judgment. The second one is about the transmission. The new Land Cruiser has an 8-speed automatic versus the GX, which has 10-speed automatic. So in everyday driving, most likely you won't feel a huge difference. But because GX has 2 more speeds than the Land Cruiser, it's going to shift a little bit faster and earlier than the Land Cruiser. If you're asking me which one is better, well, more gear the better fuel efficiency usually, and also the stepping up of the RPM is just a little bit smoother. But that depends a lot on the type of transmission and how they shift from gear to gear. I believe they're both Aishin or Japanese made transmission, so they're going to be really well made. But in terms of feel, it's a bit hard to say, but extra points goes to GX for having 10 speed versus 8 speed. The third point is about the hybrid, because the Land Cruiser only comes in hybrid format, and they call it iForce Max. It's a 2.4 liter turbocharged 4 with a hybrid where the actual motor is sandwiched between the engine and the transmission. So it's a different kind of hybrid than a normal hybrid that we see from Toyota. But for a GX, they will have a same hybrid system as a Land Cruiser with the exact same configuration, a little bit down the road, but they haven't announced it officially yet, and therefore we don't know exactly what the spec will be for that one in terms of power or torque. Again, it will use premium fuel versus standard fuel, so the GX hybrid, even though it's using the same engine as the Land Cruiser, should have a little bit more power and torque. Unfortunately, Lexus chose not to offer the 3.4 liter twin turbo V6 hybrid on the new GX, and I think that's mainly because they're reserving that engine for the Lexus LX, which I'm sure will introduce a new version likely to be called LX700, and they don't want that huge amount of power and torque reserved for a GX, because they need some differentiation between the GX and the new LX. So if you want to buy the hybrid version for fuel economy reasons, then the GX and the Land Cruiser will have identical powertrain with slight difference in power and torque, just a minuscule amount. So in that case, it's a bit of a toss-up between the Land Cruiser and the GX. The fourth difference is an important one for some of you, and for others it might not matter, and that's to do with the seating configuration. The new GX will be available with a 7-seater configuration, whereas all Land Cruisers are only 5-seater. Now keep in mind that for GX, if you order the Overtrail version, which is the off-road model of the GX, you cannot get 7-seater either, but the other models are available with a 7-seater. So if you have a larger family, or you just want to have the ability to carry more people, then you have to pick the GX with a 7-seater option versus the Land Cruiser with a 5-seater. The sixth difference is to do with the towing capacity, which might not matter to you if you're not into towing, but on the GX you can get up to 8,000 pounds of towing, whereas on the Land Cruiser is 6,000 pounds. And that's mainly due to do with the actual difference in the powertrain. So the GX with a new hybrid system, which will have the same engine as a Land Cruiser, may have a reduced towing capacity as well, but we won't know that until they make an official announcement for the hybrid for GX. But in terms of comparing the new GX and new Land Cruiser, there's a 2,000 pound advantage for the new GX. The sixth point is to do with the manufacturing quality of the Lexus GX versus a Land Cruiser. Now keep in mind that both will be built in Tahara plant in Japan, where most of the Lexuses are built, and also that's where the 4Runner is built as well. So it's a great plant, one of the best in the world, and therefore I'm very confident both Land Cruiser and the Lexus GX will be built to the highest standard. But you have to keep in a couple of things. One is that the Land Cruiser will also be built in the Hino plant, which is called the Hamura factory. And that plant, if you don't know, used to build the FJ Cruiser until it was canceled some time ago. It is still a Toyota plant, it is still a very good plant, but not quite at the same caliber as the Tahara plant from my professional opinion. Now we don't know why they're dividing the Land Cruiser between the Tahara and Hino. I suspect that the one that's built in Tahara will continue to be exported to North America, and the one for Hino might be either for domestic production or for other Asian market. I think that's how they're dividing the two factory. But either way, there is a chance that if you buy Land Cruiser, it could be built in the Hino plant versus the Tahara. That chance is slim, but the chance is still there. And from my perspective, even though it's a Toyota factory, I would prefer to buy one from Tahara. And therefore, extra points goes to the Lexus GX, because that one will only be built at the Tahara. It's the exclusive manufacturing plant for the Lexus GX, and therefore every GX you buy here in North America will be built in Japan at the Tahara plant. And so for me, that matters a little bit. Not a whole lot, but it does matter a little bit. But either way, keep in mind that the fact that they moved the production to a Tahara plant versus the Yoshiwara plant, where the Lexus LX and the Land Cruiser 300 series are built, is a really good news. Why? Because Tahara plant have a capacity to grow and to produce more than Yoshiwara factory. So there is a 4-year waiting list on the Land Cruiser 300 series right now in Japan, because Yoshiwara plant is very capped out and maxed out and they can't produce more. But the fact that Land Cruisers are built in Tara means there's a much greater chance that we can actually access one and get an allocation because the capacity is much larger than Yoshiwara plant. So either way, it's a good news. But if I have to choose one, I think GX will have a little bit of advantage because Lexus will also have a slight difference in terms of the tolerance level. So plus or minus whatever is accepted from a standard will be a bit tighter on the Lexus model compared to Toyota. So if there will be any kind of measurable difference between the two, then the GX will have some advantage. The seventh point is going to be somewhat subjective because it's to do with the styling of the front end. Now this is my 2023 GX. I still think it looks just fine. I don't even mind this big grille, but definitely the new GX and the new Land Cruiser look better. In fact, it's much more modern and looks beautiful in my eyes, but very different direction in terms of design between the Land Cruiser and GX. And only you will know which one is better for you. But don't forget, the only Land Cruiser have the round headlight option in the form of a base 1958 model or the first edition model. The new GX does not have round headlights, and therefore it looks a lot less retro. So if you want to buy one that has a bit of a connection to the past and to have it more of a retro feel, you might want to buy the Land Cruiser instead of a GX. The eighth point is something that's interesting and it's confusing to all of you, maybe even confusing to me, and it's a bit of a surprise. And that is Toyota chose not to have TRD Pro or Trail Hunter or any other TRD nameplate for the new Land Cruiser. So we don't have the traditional names. We just have the 1958 model with a round headlight, the mid-level Land Cruiser grade, and the top-level limited edition model called the first edition, which will be built in the first 2 months of Land Cruiser production. Compare that to GX, which has more trim levels to offer, and GX has this high-level version for off-roading called the Overtrail, and that's a new nameplate for Lexus. So the Overtrail is more like a TRD Pro in terms of the ability to do off-roading and type of features is offered. So I think it's a bit confusing now because if you want the traditional Toyota nameplate like TRD Pro or Trail Hunter or TRD models in general, you're not going to get that with Land Cruiser. But for the first time, you can get an off-road model in the Lexus in the form of an Overtrail, which is the one I really want to buy. So which is the right one for you? Well, you have to decide based on the type of features and options and also the design of the Land Cruiser and the GX. But for me, it's pretty obvious because I want the best off-roading version, and I'll go into that a little bit more later, and therefore my heart is moving toward the Lexus GX 550 with the Overtrail package. On the other hand, the ninth point is also an important one because only the Land Cruiser offers back to basic model called a 1958, which harks back to the design theme from 1958 when the first Land Cruiser showed up here in North America. But that model has the round headlights, a simpler design overall, and even the black fabric seats inside, and much less features compared to the higher grade models, and with a lower price tag as well. So if you want back to basics, simple configuration, a somewhat affordable Land Cruiser, then that's the only version you should consider. And we don't have such a simple model for the Lexus GX. It comes reasonably well equipped. It doesn't come in fabric seat. It doesn't come in round headlights, as I mentioned earlier. And so there is no back to basics model for Lexus GX because it's a premium model. So again, if you want something simple that looks more like the original Land Cruiser from years ago, you may want to stay with the Land Cruiser versus the GX. The 10th point is to do with off-roading features, which are offered in both the Land Cruiser and GX. But in the Land Cruiser, most of the off-road features are standard. That includes multi-terrain select, downhill assist, as well as crowd control. But those options are only offered in the Overtrail version of the Lexus GX. So to get all of the off-roading features on the GX anyway, you have to move up to the highest model. But on the Land Cruiser, pretty well everything is standard. The 11th point is going to be a bit confusing for you, and it is a little bit more to do with the engineering feature of the two models. On the Land Cruiser, you can have a manual front stabilizer disconnect, and you can do that with the push of a button. So that's available on the mid-grade level as well as a first edition model. And what it does, that if you really need to do some serious off-roading, you can disconnect the front stabilizer bar to improve the articulation of the front wheel so they can move up and down a little bit more and be able to accommodate some big rocks. That's really important for those of you who really want to do hardcore off-roading. Now, what about the Lexus GX? Well, they don't have a manual disconnect, but what they have instead is what they call the E-KDSS. KDSS stands for Kinetic Dynamic Suspension System, and there's an E on it because it's electronically controlled. And what it does is automatically disconnect or connect the front and the rear stabilizer bar based on what kind of conditions the road is. So if the road is very bumpy and it's kind of like an off-road course, then they will temporarily disconnect the front and the rear stabilizer bar to allow the wheels to move a lot more so that they have more articulation. And as soon as the road becomes smoother and becomes more normal, they will lock both the front and rear stabilizer bar so they function like a normal stabilizer bar, which balances out the ride and keeps the vehicle stable around corners. So which one is a better one? It kind of depends. If you really want to do hardcore off-roading, then I would say the Land Cruiser with a manual disconnect is still a better choice. But for most of us who do not do a lot of off-roading, but we might encounter some off-roading courses from time to time, the E-KDSS system on the GX is definitely better. For me, I do occasional off-roading, but not too often, so I'm definitely leaning toward the GX with the E-KDSS system, because that makes more sense for me. The 12th point is to do with approach angle and departure angle, which really only matters, once again, if you're doing some hardcore off-roading. So let me look into my cheat sheet here because it's going to be hard to remember all these numbers. The Land Cruiser in 1958 model has approach angle of 30 degrees, but in the mid-level Land Cruiser grade, it's 31 degrees, almost the same. Same for the first edition trims as well. And all Land Cruisers have 25-degree breakover angle, and the departure angles are 22 degrees for all the trims level as well. Let's compare that to the GX model, which has 26 degrees of approach angle, but the breakover angle is 23 degrees on the GX. And keep in mind that if you do get the GX Overtrail, the number changes a little bit because the breakover angle now increases to 24 degrees, almost the same. Finally, the departure angles for the luxury model, the Overtrail, and the premium grades, a little bit different. Is 21, 22, and 23 degrees respectively, so almost the same anyway. Overall, I think the Land Cruiser has a slight advantage, maybe 1 or 2 degrees, but for the most part, the two are about the same, so I wouldn't be able to make decisions based on that unless you do really hardcore and you want to maximize the approach and departure angles, then you might want to go with the Land Cruiser. 13th point is to do with the infotainment system. The GX has 14-inch infotainment system, which is the maximum size you can get. Whereas on the Land Cruiser, the base model has 8-inch, and you can get the larger 12.3 inches on the Land Cruiser as well if you buy the top model, which is the first edition model, or the mid-level, which is a Land Cruiser edition. The 14th point is about the pricing, which we don't know yet for either the GX or the Land Cruiser, although at least in the US for Land Cruiser, they say it will start in the mid-$50,000 range. So I estimate that the new Lexus GX 550 will be probably $8,000 to $10,000 more than Land Cruiser, and mainly because the GX does not come in the plain basic model. So there's a big price difference, and that's something you'll have to figure out. Perhaps if you compare the top of the line model, which is the first edition model on the Land Cruiser side, and the Overtrail model on the Lexus side, maybe the price difference wouldn't be as much, but I think it will be at least $8,000 US. You'll have to decide whether paying that much more extra is worth it to get the V6 and other features on the GX. The 15th point is to do with the Lexus versus Toyota, because Lexus does have a better service. As you guys know, I've owned many Toyotas, and I still own a number of Toyota cars, but recently I purchased more Lexus models than the Toyota models for whatever reason. Now, is there a difference in service level? Absolutely. Lexus will guarantee either a valet or courtesy car, so I'm not out of a car if I have to bring it in for service or warranty work, whereas Toyota won't guarantee that. They'll try to do it, but they can't guarantee it. And even though I have a really good relationship with some of the local Toyota dealers, and therefore I get decent service, there is still a measurable difference in terms of the customer service and customer treatment between Lexus and Toyota brand. So that is once again something you'll have to decide which is more important. But now that I'm used to the Lexus service, it'll be a little bit more difficult for me to go back to Toyota service, so there is an advantage for the GX. Closely related to the 15th point is my 16th point, which is a warranty. Now, depending on which country you live in, obviously the warranty will be different, but usually Lexus offers 1 year longer warranty than the comparable Toyota product with longer kilometer as well. So again, you have to decide whether something like a 4-year warranty compared to a 3-year warranty is enough of a difference to make it worthwhile to pay extra for Lexus. But if you're going to keep a car for a long time, even though most of these cars are very reliable, it might be worth paying for the Lexus versus Toyota to get the 1 year extra warranty. 17th point is the difference in terms of size between the Lexus GX and Toyota Land Cruiser. Not just the body size, but also like wheels, because on the GX you can get up to 22-inch wheels, whereas on Land Cruiser the biggest is 20-inch, with the 18-inch being the standard. But in terms of the body size, it's almost identical between the two, But for some reason, the Lexus GX is slightly longer, about 3 or 3.5 inches longer. It could be just due to some of the difference in terms of the front and the rear design. But the width and height is almost the same. The GX is just a little bit lower, less than 1 inch lower, and just a tiny bit narrower, something like a half an inch. I don't have the exact number right now in front of me. So the body size is almost the same, but the GX is a little bit longer. The 18th difference is a minor one, but for some people it's important, and that's the difference in the type of color you can pick between the Land Cruiser and Lexus GX. And this might only matter if you are really in love with one of the colors. For example, Land Cruiser offers what they call the Heritage Blue, which is kind of like a light sky blue color, and it's a beautiful color that kind of mimics what FJ Cruiser used to look like. And if you like that color, well, you have to buy a Land Cruiser because there's no such color in the Lexus GX. On the other hand, Lexus GX offers a new color called the Earth, which is a color that's kind of in between brown and beige, and that is pretty unique to GX. And if you like that color, you'll have to buy a GX. Well, there's a whole bunch of colors offered both in the GX side and Land Cruiser side, so please go ahead and take a look at it and see which one you like the best. For me, what I like the best is a nori green in the Lexus, and also the incognito color, which was the color that was first offered in the Lexus IS 500 first edition, which is kind of like a medium gray, and I really like that color. So my first choice in terms of color will be the GX Overtrail with incognito color. The 19th difference is the interior design. Overall, the Lexus is going to feel much more luxurious with better materials and just the overall better luxury feel. Not to mention that Lexus will offer Mark Levinson stereo system, which is one of the best stereo systems out there compared to a JBL system, which is the highest level in the Toyota side. And there's nothing wrong with the JBL system, but based on my comparison of owning both Lexus and Toyota, there's no question that the Mark Levinson system is superior to the JBL system. And that changes based on which model you end up buying, but my suspicion is that the Mark Levinson system on the GX, combined with the overall better material and better design, will make you feel like you're in a true luxury car in the GX versus the Land Cruiser, which is kind of going back to the original design of the Land Cruiser, keeping everything simple. So it's not going to feel luxurious in any ways. If you want that, you'll definitely want to buy the GX. The last one is the easy one, which is my 20th point, because when it comes to safety system, Toyota did not compromise either for Lexus or Toyota. They both have identical, most advanced safety system, and they're standard across all of the trim models. It's just the naming is different. It's called the Toyota Safety Sense 3.0 on the Toyota side. It's called the Lexus Safety System Plus 3.0 on the Lexus side, but they're identical. So you don't have to worry about compromising safety. And therefore, this is one of the 20 things that is not actually a difference, just a name difference only. So I just gave you 20 key differences between the Land Cruiser and the GX. And there may be a couple more. If I missed some, let me know in the comments below. But does this help you decide which ones are right for you? I mean, ultimately, it's the V6 versus Turbo 4, and then there's maybe $8,000 to $10,000 difference in price. So those are the biggies. But there are also many subtle differences that might sway you one way or the other one. If you're asking me which way I plan to go, well, I don't mind paying more to get more. So for me, the V6 engine is important. To get the better design or Lexus is important, and also to have the chance to get the 7-seater, it's also very important. So I'm going to buy the Lexus GX 550, either the Overtrail version with a 5-seater or one of the premium packages with a 7-seater option. Either way, I'm willing to sacrifice one of my two 2023 GX and trade that in to buy the new Lexus, and my name is already on the list, at the top of the list in fact, so I should be one of the first ones to buy it. So I really can't wait to buy one of the GX, but I do admit my heart is drawn to the Land Cruiser for simplicity, good pricing, and back to basic design as well. And I do have a deposit on the Land Cruiser as well, so who knows, at some point I will trade in one of my other models for Land Cruiser, and maybe I'll end up with Land Cruiser and the GX, and that would be really fun comparison as an owner. Either way, I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, please give me a thumbs up and make some comments, and if you haven't done so yet, would you kindly subscribe as well, and that would be truly helpful. Thank you so much for watching my videos. Until next time, I'm signing off for now.